when I talk about something I wanted to mention, I heard somebody mention one day, they said, they were talking about something. I got like somebody said, can't nobody hurt you like the saints. So then I thought about it, and I began to write. I said, I got to stop that lie from circulating. Nobody can hurt you like church people can hurt you. Then you never been to prison. As I know a story of a 20-year-old that he told me about 20 years ago when he asked me could he talk with me confidently, and he did, and he told me he had been raped by 15 men. Nobody can hurt you like church people? Nobody can hurt you like church people? What about the man that was stabbed by the enemy's shank? The little knife they made and stabbed him. Nobody can hurt you like church people? What about the young man that stood here on the stage of the West Coast and told us that his cellmate in prison opened his door and let his enemies in the room, and they beat him and stomped him almost to death? Can't nobody hurt you like church people? That's a lie. See, you haven't suffered the grips of slavery, been beaten with whips, had your teeth knocked out with a butt of a rifle. You haven't been hit in the head with an iron rod. And it's still happening in some parts of the world. And nobody can hurt you like church people? Oh, you never suffered death as many blacks who were not admitted to white hospitals like Dr. Charles Drew, who brought out the use of blood plasma. He thought of this. He did that. But he could not get a transfusion at a hospital they took him to, which was a white hospital then. And he died because he couldn't get his own invention. And nobody can hurt you like church people? Oh, you never have been sentenced to an injustice or been dragged by the bigots down a gravel highway in Texas until your limbs are dismembered from your body, just as it happened a few years ago in Texas. And nobody can hurt you like church people? Well, maybe you've never been a big victim of a car bomb and had your legs blown off by terrorists who don't attend your church. Or maybe you never cooperated with a man who was waiting in your house, put a knife to your throat, and you beg him to spare your life so that you can raise your children, and you agree with him never to identify him as your rapist. And nobody can hurt you like church people? Maybe you were touched by, maybe your family was not touched by the planes that flew into the Twin Towers or at the Pentagon. Or if you ignorantly profess, nobody can hurt you like church people. Maybe you haven't been mugged at night by a thief, or like the young girl up in Michigan in the United States who witnessed a crime, 11 years old she was, and the man saw her looking and took a razor blade and split her eyeballs so that she could not be a witness and identify him. Or maybe your estranged husband hasn't walked into your place of employment, doused you with fire, and struck a flame, leaving you burning there in the middle. Maybe that hasn't happened to you like that young woman, and now she's been through many operations. She's scarred up for life. And you say, can't nobody hurt you like church people? That's a lie. And maybe you and your friends have not been lined up against the wall as those kids were last week in Michigan and shot to death execution style. Maybe you haven't been picked on like the 20-year-old Hispanic male who was at a party with a majority people, and as he made an inappropriate statement to a young girl, the bigots took a mop handle and sodomized him. He had to wear a colostomy. And then he later jumped from a cruise ship to kill himself because he thought nobody cared. He survived, and then he died. So the next time you hear the opinions spoken or preached, disagree with it. Because everything people say is not God. And everything people say is not right. It's just an opinion and not a good one. Its aim is to make Christianity look unappealing and emotionally hurting. Oh, you're repeating something that you heard without thinking about God's servants and God's church. Have a group of government. Have you ever had a group of government officials promise to keep your testimony confidential if you give up your executive privilege as a sitting president of the United States not to testify, and you give it up? And then after you give it up and you testify, I did not have sex with that woman, then they publish it and vote then to take your statement and make it public. And they sell it over at the 7-Eleven store, and can't nobody hurt you like church people. It's a lie. Now, maybe you trusted in man against God's advice and made flesh your arm. Maybe you did what Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 4 says, and thou even thyself, thou shalt discontinue from thine inheritance, when God spoke to his people, that I gave you, you'll discontinue from it. And I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in a land thou knowest not, for you have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever. 5th verse, God told his people, thus saith the Lord, cursed be the man that trusts in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord. Though you may be hurting, don't attack God's church and God's servants. The gates of hell can't prevail against it. So that was now that folk could stop saying that. You've been through whatever you've been through. You haven't been through it yet.